Welcome everyone. My name is Oyama Mdleleni. This is my YouTube channel. On this channel, I talk about God's people, God's promises, and God's principles. And if it is your first time tuning in, I hope you enjoy and like the video. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you for the support. Today I am going to be talking about waiting on the Lord. Are you waiting on God for something? It could be you're waiting for a child, you're waiting for marriage, you're waiting for healing, you're waiting for a family member to be saved, you are waiting for a promotion, or maybe you could be waiting for your first client in your business. What are you waiting for on the Lord? What have you been praying for and asking God to answer you on? At some point in our lives, we always wait for God on something, because there could be delays at times in His. We see it as delay when our prayers are not being answered. It's like, God, where are you? Are you hearing me? Are you going to answer? When are you going to answer? Are you going to answer this way or that way? So those are the questions that go through our minds as we are waiting for the Lord. And it can be a very difficult process or journey when you are waiting for God on something that you feel like He's not answering you on, or He's not answering you the way you would like Him to answer you. So we're going to be looking at the story of Abraham, which we find in the book of Genesis. The story of Abraham, I think it is a perfect example of how we wait on God, and how sometimes it can feel like a lifetime while we are waiting on God. The story of Abraham, we hear God in chapter 12 of Genesis. That's where God is making this promise to Abraham, telling Abraham that I am going to make you a father of nations. At this point in time, Abraham is 75 years of age. God is telling him this promise. Him and his wife have been struggling to conceive, and chapter 12 comes. Okay, God gives him the promise, and then God answers the promise in chapter 21. So from chapter 12 to chapter 21, chapter 12 the promise is made, chapter 21 the promise is fulfilled. What happened the years now from age of 75 up to the age of 100? The promise is made at the age of 75. The promise is answered at the age of 100. So these 25 years, what happens, what is going through in the mind of Abraham and his wife as they are waiting for God to answer this promise that He has made to them? So when we look at this story, I have identified 3 things that have happened and that have helped Abraham, I believe have helped Abraham with his faith, even though we do find at some point in time that his faith becomes a bit wiggly, or becomes doubtful at some point in our lives. But God does fulfill His promise, even though He has seen that there was also doubt in the mind of Abraham and his wife Sarah. I've identified 3 things. The first thing that I've identified in the story of Abraham that seem to be in my mind that have also helped Abraham is that God keeps on repeating Himself. He keeps on reminding Abraham of the promise. I think He does this 4 times in between this chapter 12 and chapter 21. He does it 4 times where God keeps on reminding. I don't think God is reminding Abraham because God forgot, but I think God reminds Abraham because He could see that Abraham was starting to doubt. He was starting to get frustrated in terms of when is this promise going to be answered. So God keeps on reminding Abraham that I told you I'm going to make you a father of nations. I'm going to give you an heir. God keeps on reminding Abraham. Even in our own lives, when we look at, when we are waiting on God to answer or to fulfill a promise that He has made in our lives according to His word, God will show us signs that I did promise you this. I did promise you this. We just need to be aware of those signs that will push us, that will give us hope in terms of the promise that He has made, in terms of us waiting and having faith in the wait. Because waiting is not about complaining while you're in the wait, but it is about praising and worshiping the Lord while you are waiting for the promise to be fulfilled. So that's the first thing I recognized in the text, is that God keeps on reminding Abraham of the promise that He has made. And then secondly, while Abraham is waiting on the Lord to answer the promise that he has given him to fulfill it, I recognize on the text that there are favors that God does for Abraham. 3 times where Abraham comes to the Lord and asks the Lord for a favor. The first time is when his nephew Lot is in trouble. Abraham left home with his nephew Lot and his father, but his father died along the way. He left home with his nephew Lot and his wife, and then along the way now they separated with his nephew Lot because their livestock could not feed in the same area because now it was growing. So they had to separate so that now they could identify a land where Lot would be able to feed his livestock and also Abraham to do the same. So in their separation now, Lot stayed in the city of Sodom and Gomorrah. We know the story of the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, where the Lord decides to destroy the city because of all the immoralities that were happening in those cities. And then now, as Lot is staying there, he is now also staying there, and therefore now he's going to be affected when the city is burned down with all the people that live there. And Abraham comes before the Lord and asks God to spare his nephew's life. And God answers Abraham's request. Tells the angels tells Lot and his wife and 2 daughters to run and not look back. So the second time that Abraham comes before the Lord, the second time he's not coming before the Lord. It is the Lord that sees that he is in trouble, and the Lord helps Abraham. Abraham and his wife are in this city now where they are camping, and the king in the city, King Abimelech, he is the king of this city. Abraham now tells his wife to say, "You must tell them that you're my sister." So he tells his wife to lie and say it's his sister, not his wife. And as he introduces now his wife as his sister, his reason for this lie is that if they find out that he is Abraham's wife, Sarah is Abraham's wife, they're going to kill him to get her, because he's going to be on the way if the king now finds interest in his wife. So now the king finds interest in Sarah and he invites her. As now the king is sleeping, God comes to the king in his dream, and he tells him to take the wife of the man back to her husband, to take Sarah back to Abraham. And the king is surprised by this, because now she was introduced as the sister to Abraham. But the king does as the Lord has told him, because he fears the Lord, that the Lord might avenge or might do something to the king. And the third time that now Abraham finds favor in the Lord is now during their doubt with his wife, Sarah. His wife comes up with a plan and says, "Okay, I have a servant. Her name is Hagar. So Hagar will sleep with my husband, and then they will have a child. She will conceive, they will have a child. So she tells this to her husband, and they agree to this plan or plot. And then Abraham sleeps with Hagar. Hagar falls pregnant, and they name the child. Ishmael. But while Hagar is still pregnant, she starts to act funny. She starts to act like she's the boss of the house, and then Sarah is not impressed with how she is now acting, and she chases her away. She kicks her out of the house. As now she kicks her out of the house, an angel comes to Hagar on the way while she's sitting somewhere crying. An angel comes to her, and the angel tells her to go back to the house and to submit and to be humble, to submit to Sarah and Abraham. So Hagar does that, and now they're able to raise Ishmael as husband and wife now, as Abraham and Sarah. Even though it's at some later stage now, as he has grown, he's still a young man, and they again are told to live with his mother because there seemed to be conflict now between their son Isaac and Ishmael. Ishmael is not treating Isaac in the most kind way. So now they live at a later stage. But God is given them the favor now of not kicking Hagar while she's pregnant, and her wandering off, and them not being able to name their child and be able to be around him. So those three favors that God does for Abraham while in the waiting. And then now, these three, yes, the three favors, this is still number 2. And then the third thing that I recognize happening while they're in the waiting, God tells Abraham to circumcise all males around him, including his son Ishmael, and then including himself, and also all the males that are around him. To me, this represents that when we are waiting on the Lord, we also need to cultivate our environment. We need to cut off some behaviors, some patterns, some beliefs in our lives that might be contradicting us waiting on the promise. That might also be fueling also some of the doubt that we may be going through. It could be watching what we watch, what we listen to, and what we speak also with our mouth, that we need to also be cognizant of. So now the circumcising part, meaning cutting off, to me means that we need to cultivate that environment. We need to get some things out of that environment that are not serving us in the process, that are not serving us in the waiting season of our lives while we are waiting on God. So these are the 3 things that I've identified in the story of Abraham and Sarah that I believe we can also incorporate in our own lives when we are waiting on God for something. While it feels like the waiting is very long, it's forever, God is not listening, God is not answering us. But if we can be aware of these things to see that He's still keeping His promise, He will never change His mind. The Bible tells us that He is not a son of man, that He is not a man that He should lie. He's not a son of man that He should change His mind. So God will never change His mind about the promise that He has made to you. It could be taking longer. He could be preparing you for what you are about to receive. And also, you need to be mindful that it might not come the way that you perceive it will come. So you need to also be not married to the outcome, but be mindful and be aware of how God can fulfill that promise in your life. So I hope you can take these also for your own life. Take these 3 things that I've identified in the story, and also which are, just to break them down again. Firstly, God will remind you over and over again of the promise that He has made to you. He has made to you. You will see it around you. He will keep on reminding you. While you are in the waiting, there are favors that God will be doing for you, things that you could be asking Him to do for you, that He will do for you while you are in the waiting for Him. And also there are things that there's a part you need to play. There's action that needs to come from your side, that whereby you cut off things that could be hindrance to what God is trying to do in your life, and could be where you are cultivating your environment so that it is able to receive what God is preparing you for. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you can share the video and give it a thumbs up. And I hope you can subscribe to this channel. And this channel will talk everything God's people, God's promises, and God's principles. Take care then. Until next time. Thank you. Goodbye.